Welcome to Urban American Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. The sound of chainsaws cutting through the peaceful Sunday morning air was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. Amanda Martinez jumped out of bed and ran to the porch of her Victorian home, which stood at the highest point of her 50-acre estate in the Berkshire Hills, Massachusetts. What she saw made her heart stop. A team of workers was felling her precious century-old trees, while a middle-aged man supervised the operation with a satisfied smile on his face. "Gregory Wilson," Amanda shouted, immediately recognizing her neighbor, president of the Pleasant Valley Residents Association, the condominium adjacent to her property. "Stop there right now?" Gregory, a 50-year-old man with perfectly combed gray hair and a green sweater with his association's logo, just nodded as if he were greeting an old friend. "Good morning, Amanda. We're finally turning this wasted space into something useful for the community." Amanda, still in her robe, rushed downstairs, her hands shaking as she dialed the police. Her property, known locally as the Martinez Sanctuary, was a wildlife refuge established by her family 3 generations ago. The trees being cut down had been planted by her grandfather, an immigrant who had bought the land in 1940. While the police were on their way, Amanda watched in horror as Gregory directed a growing group of workers. They had already removed the historic stone fences, a hallmark of Massachusetts country estates, and were installing prefabricated playground equipment. "This is private property, Wilson. You don't have permission to be here," Amanda shouted, positioning herself between the workers and a century-old apple tree. "Oh dear," Gregory replied with a condescending smile. "The HOA voted unanimously to expand our recreational area. This unproductive land will be put to much better use as a sustainable park for our children. Your association has no jurisdiction over my property," Amanda retorted, feeling her blood boil. "I was never part of the Pleasant Valley HOA." The arrival of 2 police cars momentarily interrupted the chaos. Officer Robert Henderson, a veteran of the department who knew the area well, quickly assessed the situation. "Mr. Wilson, you are on private property without permission. I need to ask everyone to leave immediately." Gregory, however, was not shaken. He took a folder out of his briefcase and started showing the officer documents. "Officer, we have here a petition signed by 200 residents approving this ecological project. The town hall has already given the go-ahead for our initiative to create community green spaces." "That doesn't mean anything," Amanda intervened, now accompanied by her lawyer, Regina Palmer, who had arrived in a hurry after a desperate phone call. "The property is registered in my name, with documentation dating back to 1940. You are committing a crime." Over the next few days, the situation only deteriorated. While the legal process dragged on, Gregory obtained a temporary injunction preventing Amanda from interfering in what he called a sustainable community development project. He started charging visitors for tickets, organized music festivals, and even an organic produce market, all without any authorization or environmental impact study. The Martinez Sanctuary, once home to dozens of species of birds and small mammals, was now filled with families picnicking, children running around, and street vendors. The wild animals had disappeared, driven away by the constant noise and invasive human presence. Amanda spent sleepless nights watching the lights of the makeshift park from her balcony, feeling helpless as her sanctuary was transformed into a commercial amusement park. Her attempts to talk to other HOA members were met with closed doors and unanswered phone calls. Regina Palmer, his lawyer, worked tirelessly gathering evidence. "What Gregory is doing is clearly illegal," she explained during a meeting at her home. "He is not only trespassing on private property, but also operating a business without a license and violating various environmental regulations." The final straw came when Gregory announced plans to build an ecological events center on the site of the Martinez family's old barn, a historic structure that had served as a wildlife rehabilitation center for decades. "We can't allow this to continue," Amanda declared, determined. "My grandfather built this sanctuary to protect nature, not to be a commercial theme park disguised as a green initiative." Regina nodded, organizing a stack of documents. "I've prepared a comprehensive lawsuit. We're suing not only Gregory, but also the HOA for property damage trespass and destruction of historical and environmental heritage. Meanwhile, the local community began to split. Some residents, seduced by the idea of a new leisure space, supported Gregory. Others, especially older residents who knew the history of the Martinez Sanctuary, sided with Amanda. Lucy Chun, a local biologist who often carried out research in the sanctuary, began documenting the environmental impact of the changes. "What's happening here is an ecological disaster," she declared during an interview with a local newspaper. "Species that have inhabited this area for generations are being displaced without any consideration for the balance of the ecosystem." Amanda, watching the sunset that evening from her balcony, swore to herself that she would not let her family's legacy be destroyed by a megalomaniac project disguised as an environmental initiative. The battle for the Martinez Sanctuary was just beginning, and she was prepared to fight with all her might to preserve not only her property, but also the true meaning of environmental conservation. The morning after the raid began brought an even more disturbing revelation for Amanda. Checking her social networks, she discovered dozens of promotional posts about Eco Paradise Park, as Gregory had named as illegal appropriation. The posts showed smiling families enjoying an authentic natural sanctuary transformed into a sustainable community space, with tickets costing $25 per person. "This is outrageous," exclaimed Amanda to Regina Palmer, her lawyer, who had arrived early for an emergency meeting. "He's not only destroying my property, but profiting from it." Regina scanned the posts on her tablet as she took notes. "This is excellent for our case. Every ticket sold is further proof of ill-gotten gains from someone else's property." Lucy Chun, the biologist who is documenting the environmental damage, entered the room carrying a folder full of photographs and preliminary reports. "The situation is worse than we imagined. The excavations to install the equipment have damaged several fox and owl burrows that have inhabited the area for generations. And those centuries-old trees? They were essential for several species of migratory birds." While the three women were discussing strategies, an unusual movement caught their attention through the window. A film crew was setting up equipment near the old bar. Gregory, wearing a moss-green blazer and carrying a microphone, seemed to be preparing for an interview. Amanda quickly turned on the local TV, and her stomach churned. It was a live broadcast of the largest community environmental revitalization project in Massachusetts, as Gregory eloquently described it on camera. "Our vision is to transform this underutilized space into a model of sustainability and environmental education," he declared, gesturing widely. "For decades, this property remained closed to the community. Now, finally, we are giving nature back to the people." "Giving nature back?" Amanda muttered, incredulous. "He destroyed a wildlife sanctuary to build a theme park." Regina was already on the phone to the broadcaster, demanding a right of reply and warning of the legal implications of promoting illegal activities. Lucy, for her part, began organizing a group of local biologists and environmentalists to systematically document every environmental violation. In the afternoon, Amanda received an unexpected visit from Martin Cooper, a former Pleasant Valley resident who had resigned as HOA vice president in protest at Gregory's actions. "You need to know the truth," Martin said, nervously adjusting his glasses. "Gregory is using the park as a front for a much larger development. I found blueprints for a luxury condominium complex that he plans to build as soon as he can establish a presence on his property." The revelation hit Amanda like a punch in the gut. "So the environmental talk is just a smokescreen," Martin added. "He has connections with a Boston real estate developer. The plan is to use the community's pro-environment sentiment to take over the land and then gradually turn it into a real estate development." Regina immediately began investigating the developer mentioned by Martin, uncovering a web of connections between Gregory and several controversial developments in Massachusetts. Lucy, analyzing the areas where the equipment was installed, realized that they coincided perfectly with the most suitable sites for construction. Amanda spent the evening going through old photographs of the sanctuary, including images of her grandfather working on the land. In one of them, dated 1962, he appeared planting one of the trees that Gregory had felled. The photo bore an inscription, For future generations, may they always find peace and refuge in this little piece of paradise. The next morning, Eco Paradise Park was busier than ever. Gregory had organized an environmental awareness festival, charging $50 per ticket. Street vendors offered organic food and sustainable products, while children played on the equipment installed over what used to be an important wildlife corridor. Amanda was watching everything from her balcony when she noticed something strange. Men in discreet suits taking measurements and photographs in the most remote areas of the property. Her heart raced as she recognized the logo on their clipboards. It was from the same developer Martin had mentioned. "We need to act fast," Regina said when informed. "I'm going to file an emergency injunction. If we can prove the true commercial intent behind the project, we can overturn the temporary protection it has obtained." Lucy brought more allies to the cause. A group of biology students started a video documentation project, recording every species displaced and every damage to the ecosystem. The local media, which had initially embraced Gregory's narrative, began to question the inconsistencies in his project. Meanwhile, Gregory stepped up his activities, apparently trying to establish as much of a presence as possible before legal action could stop him. He announced a series of ecological retreats with daily rates of $200, promising participants an authentic experience of connection with nature, ironically, in the same area where his actions had destroyed natural habitats. Amanda found strength in a growing community of supporters. Former visitors to the sanctuary, researchers who had studied its biodiversity, and even Pleasant Valley residents who were beginning to see through Gregory's green facade rallied to her defense. The battle for the Martinez Sanctuary was turning into something bigger, a clash between authentic preservation and commercial exploitation disguised as environmentalism, between respect for private property and corporate greed, between the true protection of nature and its commodification. Lawyer Regina Palmer's office was buzzing with activity that morning when Amanda arrived with an alarming discovery. Scouring historical records online, she had found a disturbing pattern. Gregory Wilson was involved in similar schemes in 3 other Massachusetts counties. "Look at this," Amanda said, spreading out documents on Regina's desk. In Amherst, 2018, he used the same sustainable park tactic to take control of a historic farm. In Northampton, 2019, it was an environmental preservation center that ended up becoming a luxury condominium. And in Great Barrington last year, an ecological reserve that turned into a resort. Regina adjusted her glasses, examining the documents with increasing interest. "This changes everything. We can establish a pattern of predatory behavior, but we need more evidence about his connections with the developer." Lucy Chun, who had become a key ally, entered the room carrying her laptop. "You need to see this. I managed to access the public records of the Evergreen Development Corporation. Guess who's a member of the board of directors? Gregory Wilson." The revelation provoked a momentary silence in the room. Amanda sat down heavily in a chair, processing the information. So he's not just some megalomaniac HOA president. He's part of a larger land-grabbing scheme. At that moment, Martin Cooper, the former vice president of the HOA, rushed into the office. "I have some bad news. Gregory is calling a special HOA meeting for tonight. He's going to propose the formal annexation of Martinez Shrine to the Pleasant Valley territory." "He can't do that," Amanda protested. "My property isn't even part of their jurisdiction." Regina was already in action mode. "He can't legally, but he can try to create a semblance of legitimacy for his actions. We need to be at that meeting." The assembly was scheduled for 7 p.m. at the Pleasant Valley Community Center. Amanda, Regina, and Lucy arrived early, finding the place already packed. Gregory was on stage, impeccable in his dark green suit, smiling confidently as he chatted with other board members. "Dear members of the community," he began, his mellifluous voice echoing through the microphone. "We are here to discuss the future of our neighborhood and our vision of sustainability." Amanda observed the audience. Many residents seemed genuinely convinced by Gregory's environmentalist speech. Others, especially the older residents, were skeptical. Lucy discreetly filmed everything with her cell phone, documenting every word. Regina was furiously taking notes, preparing to intervene at the appropriate moment. "And now," Gregory continued, I'm pleased to introduce our partners from Evergreen Development Corporation, who will be sharing with us the plans for the second phase of Eco Paradise Park. An executive from the developer began to present slides showing planned improvements: an eco-friendly convention center, sustainable luxury bungalows, and a natural spa, all on the grounds of the Martinez Sanctuary. Regina stood up. "Excuse me, Mr. Wilson. Before I go any further, I would like to inform everyone present that they are potentially becoming accomplices to an illegal appropriation of private property." A murmur ran through the room. Gregory tried to maintain control. "Dr. Palmer, this is a private meeting of the HOA, a meeting where you're conspiring to take possession of property that does not belong to your jurisdiction," Regina interrupted. "And I have documents here that prove your involvement in similar schemes in other counties." Lucy projected some of the evidence they had discovered onto the screen. Before and after photos of the other properties Gregory had transformed, showing the real environmental destruction behind the green facade. Amanda took the microphone. "Neighbors, please understand. The Martinez Sanctuary is not just my property, it's a real preservation legacy, not this commercial sham they're trying to create. My grandfather established this refuge to protect wildlife, not to be a luxury playground." Some residents began to speak out. An elderly woman stood up. "I remember Mr. Martinez. He allowed schools to take children to learn about nature, free of charge. That was community service." Gregory tried to regain control of the situation, but the damage had been done. Martin Cooper presented his own evidence. Internal emails showing that the sustainable park was just the first phase of a larger real estate development plan. The meeting ended in turmoil, with several HOA members demanding Gregory's resignation. But Amanda knew the battle was far from over. As she left the community center, she observed Gregory on the phone, his face red with anger. "He's not going to give up easily," Regina commented as they walked to the car. "There's a lot of money involved in this project." "It doesn't matter," Amanda replied, determined. "My grandfather used to say that some things are more valuable than money. The sanctuary is one of them." Lucy, reviewing the footage on her cell phone, smiled. "Well, at least now we have the community on our side. And more importantly, we have concrete proof of his true intentions." As they drove back through the sanctuary, illuminated by the last rays of the sun, Amanda saw a group of deer crossing one of the few areas still untouched. It was a reminder of what was really at stake. Not just her property, but a true haven for wildlife, a piece of family history, and an example of authentic environmental preservation. The battle for the Martinez Sanctuary had entered a new phase, and Amanda was more prepared than ever to face it. The Boston Globe special report carried the headline Amanda had been waiting for: "Real Estate Scam Disguised as Green Initiative. The True Story of Eco Paradise Park." The story, the result of weeks of investigative journalism, detailed the previous operations of Gregory Wilson and the Evergreen Development Corporation in other Massachusetts towns. "Finally, the truth is coming out," Amanda said, sharing the link to the story with Regina and Lucy in their messaging group. The response was immediate. An emergency meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. Meanwhile, Gregory was stepping up his actions at the sanctuary. A new metal fence had been erected overnight, completely blocking Amanda's access to the western part of her property. Heavy construction equipment was starting to arrive, suggesting that he planned to accelerate his plans before legal action could stop him. "He's desperate," Regina observed, examining the new photos Amanda had set. "But he made a crucial mistake by trying to rush things. I've arranged an emergency hearing with Judge Eleanor Barrett for tomorrow." Lucy arrived at Regina's office carrying a thick folder. "You need to see this. I got access to the environmental impact studies that Gregory claimed to have carried out. They're all forgeries. The experts' signatures were forged." The revelation was explosive. Amanda recognized one of the names on the documents. "Dr. James Morrison? He was my biology professor. He's been retired for 5 years and lives in Arizona." Martin Cooper, who continued to monitor the HOA's activities, brought more worrying information. "Gregory has called a secret meeting with some investors for tonight. I got a copy of the presentation he prepared. They're planning to start building the condos next week, even before any official approvals." Amanda's team worked tirelessly to organize all the evidence. Regina prepared a meticulous presentation for the hearing. while Lucy finalized a detailed report on the environmental damage already done to the sanctuary. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Pleasant Valley residents, journalists, and environmental activists flocked to follow the case. Gregory arrived accompanied by a team of corporate lawyers, his confident smile beginning to show signs of strain. Judge Barrett, known for her firm stance in environmental cases, examined the documents presented with meticulous attention. "Mr. Wilson," she began, "are you aware that falsifying environmental documents is a federal crime?" Gregory's face paled. His lawyers whispered frantically. One of them stood up. "Your Honor, my client had no knowledge of any irregularities in the documents. If there were any mistakes, they were made by third parties." "Third parties?" Regina intervened, presenting recovered emails that showed Gregory personally requesting the forgeries. "We have evidence that Mr. Wilson not only knew about, but orchestrated the entire fraud." The hearing went on for hours. Amanda testified about the history of the sanctuary, its ecological importance, and the damage caused by the invasion. Lucy presented scientific data on the impact on local species. Martin Cooper revealed the real estate development plans. During a break, Amanda observed Gregory in a corner of the courtroom, shouting on the phone to someone from Evergreen Development. His facade as a concerned environmentalist had completely crumbled. "Investors are abandoning ship," Martin informed her, after interjecting a few comments. "Evergreen stock has plummeted 15% since the Globe story was published." Judge Barrett returned with her decision, an immediate restraining order against Gregory and Evergreen Development, demanding the removal of all illegally built structures in the Martinez sanctuary. In addition, she ordered a criminal investigation into the document forgeries. "This court," she declared, "will not tolerate the destruction of environmental heritage under the guise of sustainable development. Private property and environmental preservation are rights that must be protected, not exploited for personal gain." Gregory left the courtroom in silence, ignoring the reporters who surrounded him. His defeat, however, did not mean the end of the battle. Amanda knew that recovering the sanctuary would require time, resources, and a careful restoration plan. "We've won an important victory," Regina said, "but we still have a lot of work to do. We need to make sure that every species that has been displaced can return, that every tree that has been cut down is replaced." Lucy was already organizing a team of volunteer biologists and conservationists. "We're going to turn this into a model restoration project. Show how real environmental conservation should be done." As she was leaving the courthouse, Amanda received an unexpected message. Several Pleasant Valley residents wanted to help restore the sanctuary. The community that Gregory had tried to manipulate was now coming together to repair the damage he had caused. "Your grandfather would be proud," Regina commented, watching Amanda examine the old photographs of the sanctuary on her cell phone. "Not only did you protect his land, but you inspired a new generation to value true environmental preservation." The legal battle was won, but the real work of recovery had only just begun. Amanda looked to the horizon, where the scars left on the sanctuary were still visible, but now carried the promise of renewal. The dawn brought with it a renewed sense of hope for the Martinez sanctuary. After her victory in court, Amanda looked out from her balcony at a scene very different from the one that had plagued her in recent weeks. Instead of construction equipment and street vendors, dozens of community volunteers were gathering to begin the restoration work. "It's amazing how things have changed," commented Lucy Chun, consulting her clipboard. "We have over 100 volunteers registered today, including biologists, landscapers, and even some Pleasant Valley residents." Regina Palmer, who had become more than a lawyer for Amanda, arrived carrying boxes of documents. And the news keeps getting better. The federal investigation into Gregory and Evergreen Development has uncovered a much larger scheme of environmental fraud throughout the northeastern United States. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of events. After the court order, Gregory Wilson disappeared, leaving behind a web of incriminating documents that led to the mass resignation of the Pleasant Valley HOA board. Evergreen Development Corporation was facing multiple investigations, and its executives were being indicted one after the other. Amanda called out Martin Cooper, now elected interim HOA president. I brought something you need to see. He was carrying an old metal plaque, discovered during the removal of the playground equipment. It was the original sanctuary plaque, installed by his grandfather in 1940, declaring the area a wildlife refuge. Tears welled up in Amanda's eyes as she cleaned decades of dirt from the plaque. "We're going to reinstall it as soon as we finish restoring the main entrance," she said, her voice laced with emotion. The restoration work was monumental. Each area of the shrine required specific attention. Lucy coordinated teams dedicated to reintroducing native species and restoring habitats. Arboriculture experts assessed the remaining trees and planned the replanting of lost species. "We found seeds from the original trees," exclaimed Dr. Patricia Whitman, a retired botanist who had studied the sanctuary in the 1980s. "Your grandfather kept a seed bank in the basement of the barn. Some are still viable." The discovery was like a gift from the past. Amanda remembered the stories her grandfather used to tell about how he collected and preserved seeds from every important species in the sanctuary. "He always said that we should save a bit of the present for the future," she recalled, smiling. The local media, which had previously been manipulated by Gregory, now covered the restoration process on a daily basis. The Martinez Sanctuary had become a symbol of resistance against predatory development and an example of how communities could come together to protect their natural spaces. "Look at this," said Regina, showing her tablet. 3 other communities in Massachusetts have already started similar lawsuits against fraudulent developments. We're setting an important precedent. The most significant transformation, however, was in the Pleasant Valley community itself. Residents who once blindly supported Gregory's initiatives were now dedicated to authentic preservation. An educational program was established, allowing local schools to visit the sanctuary to learn about environmental conservation. "Your grandfather would be proud," commented Maria Ramirez, a former resident who knew the sanctuary's founder. "He always said that true conservation comes from the heart, not from profit." While coordinating the restoration work, Amanda discovered old documents in her grandfather's office that revealed his original vision for the sanctuary. He had mapped out natural wildlife corridors, nesting areas, and specific conservation zones, a meticulous plan that now serve as a guide for the restoration. "It's as if he knew we'd need this one day," Amanda commented to Lucy, who was studying the maps with fascination. "Every detail he recorded helps us better understand how to restore the natural balance." The recovery of the Martinez Sanctuary would take months, maybe years, but the first signs of rebirth were already visible. Birds began to return little by little, small mammals reappeared, and green shoots emerged where before there was only destruction. "This is more than environmental restoration," Regina observed, as they walked through the sanctuary at sunset. "It's a renewal of community values." Amanda stopped next to a newly planted young oak sapling. It was the same species as the century-old trees that Gregory had felled. "Every tree we plant, every habitat we restore, is a promise for the future," she said, gently touching the tender leaves. The Martinez Sanctuary emerged from this ordeal not only restored, but strengthened. The attempt to destroy it had, ironically, revealed its true value to the community. The legacy of preservation, started by an immigrant who dreamed of a haven for wildlife, lived on through his granddaughter and a community that finally understood the true meaning of sustainability. As the shadows of dusk lengthened over the renovated sanctuary, Amanda realized that this was not just a story of victory over greed, but a testimony to the power of perseverance, truth, and community unity in defense of what is truly precious. The Martinez Sanctuary, once again, was a true refuge not just for wildlife, but for all who sought to understand the real meaning of environmental preservation and the inestimable value of the natural legacy we share.